asking a question. And because of what I want to talk about this morning, I want to ask you that same question, and it is this. How long do you expect to live? What do you think?
1 at a time.
60s, 70s maybe?
Well, please longer than that.
Push it into the 80s? Maybe squeeze it into the 90s? What do you think?
101, that's what my grandma was.
Well, the Christian answer for that is that humans were born with the potential to live forever. But Christians also know that in order to do that, we have to go through a character change. We cannot expect to live forever the way we are or the way we were born. We have to go through a transformation of self. And Christians have a word for that. It's called salvation. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And in order to do that, salvation has two actual components to it. It has a divine component and a human component. And what I want to do today is use a metaphor or an analogy to help explain what the difference is and how it works. And I'm going to choose the metaphor I'm going to use is a football, the game of football. And in a game of football, if you want to play football, you have to have a team. And you have to have players that want to play on the team and try out and get on the team. Well, the Christian religion is the same way. In order to play on a Christian team, you have to join the team, and you do that through your baptism. Then, once you're on the team, then you have to select what position you want to play on the team. And we do that in the Christian faith. We do that through our talents and the gifts and talents and our preferences. We pick out which position we want to play. So now we're ready for the next phase, and that is a team, in order to play football, has to have a coach. And we have a coach in the Christian religion. We have Pastor Sandy for our church, the clergy, and we have the elders that teach us how to play the game. And then what we have to have is a playbook. And the playbook in Christianity is the best one, and that is the Holy Bible. That's our playbook. Now when we have all of this, we have to have a training regimen. And we have a training regimen in the Christian faith. We go to worship every Sunday. We have classes. We have adult Bible class, for example. We have special programs like our caring ministries. So we're equipped with a coaching staff to help us prepare for game day. But we have to go through the regimen. We have to condition ourselves before we can expect to be successful. Now, in the game of football, the players who come off the field are different than they were before they started the game. They go through a change, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But when we're ready to play the game, we take the field. We have our uniforms on, we got our cleats, we've got our pads, we've got our helmets on, we're ready to play the game. So we take our position on the field, and the referee blows the whistle, and the timer starts the clock, and the game begins. But wait a minute, there's no contact, there's no blocking and tackling going on. Why? Well, that's because we need the kickoff. Somebody has to kick the ball off. Now, the metaphor that I'm using today on the football game is the kickoff is the divine component of salvation. And there's only one player that can kick it off for our Christian team, and that's Christ Jesus. In fact, he kicked that ball off from the cross a long time ago. So that ball's been in the air for all of us to catch. And what we have to do is catch the ball. Now the ball happens to be Christ's gift to us of his death and resurrection on the cross, set us free from the bondage of sin. That's the ball. And all we have to do is catch it. Now, when we catch it, we actually receive Christ into our lives as Lord and Savior. Now, we got to make sure that when that ball comes down, we don't drop it, because sometimes in a game, the players drop the ball. We want to make sure we pull that ball down and tuck it in tight against our soul to make sure that we don't fumble it later on in the game. And that brings us to the fact that now, after we've caught the ball, the struggle begins. Contact, blocking and tackling, everything begins. And it's this change that happens when we are in the competition, when players are in the competition. They're different at the end of the game than before. Well, what happened? Well, the team, during the course of the struggle, the team may not have executed the plays exactly the way the coaches drew them up, or the way they're documented in the playbook. And so there were some mistakes made that ended up losing yardage, and sometimes the opponent scored. Some of the players weren't as good in condition as they thought they were, and they got knocked on their backs. I was going to use the word fanny, but I can't do that here. And then other players got injured, and they had to sit out, and a sub had to come in. But also, there's times during that game where the team and all the players on it execute the plays exactly as it was drawn up by the coaches. They've studied their playbook, they know exactly what to do, and the play goes off without a hitch, and we get a score. And that score is exhilarating. It's just a wonderful thing to feel that you could actually defeat the opponent at the end of the game. So the thing to remember here is that that contest, that blocking, the tackling, the wins and the losses, all the things that go on in the game changes those players. They're not the same as they were before they started the game. And the next game they play, the same thing's going to happen. They're going to become a little more mature, a little wiser. They're going to remember to go back to the weight room and get a little stronger. So that's what we have to go through as Christians. Now, you may have noticed in your program, on the worship program this morning, that there's an insert in there that has some scriptures on it. That's there for you to take home. But what the scriptures list are the theology of St. Paul. And St. Paul has a theology that centers on faith through being saved, salvation through faith. On the other side, there's the struggle, which we're going to talk about, and that's St. James. And saying, in addition to faith, you caught the ball, we know what that's like. And by the way, every time we catch the ball, guess what? If we catch that ball, guess what Jesus promised he'd do for us? He would reserve an apartment in his Father's kingdom for us, with our name on the door, when we catch that ball. But now, we've got to be able to get ourselves in condition to live there. And what we do, and the scriptures that James talks about, outlines that for us, shows us that this is what you have to do. You have to do your works. So now we have two things we have to do. We know that we have to change who we are and what we have to do. We have to go through that transformation. And what we have to do in every game, you have to know something about your opponent and what you're up against. And you have to study what they're going to do, what those players are going to do. Same thing on the Christian team. We got to know something about our opponent. And basically, the opponent comes at us with two forces. Evil, in general, out there, swirling around, tempting us 24/7, and our own human nature. And in order to be successful and defeat the opponent, we have to have a game plan. And every team has to have an overall strategy. What are all the players trying to do through the whole game? And that game plan for us is for us to obey the Christ's commandments to us. Now, Jesus asks us and calls us to obey him, but that's not easy. It's really hard. For example, love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, I can think of a couple of neighbors that's going to make that really tough for me. Or forgive someone else, regardless of the degree of injury to yourself or your loved one. You have to forgive that perpetrator without any condition whatsoever. That is hard to do. Another commandment that Christ asks us to do, for example, is turn the other cheek. Are you kidding me? But that's the kind of transformation that we're talking about. He asks us to walk humbly and wash the feet of our brothers and our sisters. Ultimate humility. Now, that stuff's hard to do because we're down on our three-point stamp on the line of scrimmage of life. So this life is coming at us pretty fast. That's pretty hard to do. But if we do it, if we are successful in obeying what Christ calls out in our playbook, we begin to change. We actually pull away from the creatures we were born as toward a more begotten or Christ-like being. Each time we're successful in doing that, we go just like the struggle on the football team. We're learning, and we're successful, and we've got to keep doing that. Now, view that, we all have a car, and it has a fuel tank in the back, and we have a gauge on the dash that tells us how much fuel is in there. Well, when we're born, we're created. God creates us. And that tank, the needle on that tank is on empty. And what we've got to do is get that tank, we've got to start getting that tank to fill up. And every time we're successful in obeying Christ on that line of scrimmage of life, every time we're ready to do that, our tank starts to fill up a little bit. And we've got to keep doing that. That's how we change, that's how we transform who we are. But now we have to transform on what we do. And that is to spread the gospel. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear the call to spread the gospel, I take that to mean I got to go into a sales mode. And I got to get out there with the Bible on the corner and start selling the gospel. Well, I'm not made that way. I can't sell things. I'm just not put together that way. I don't like to be approached by someone else to selling me something, and I hate to do that myself. So, but I found another way. We have a model how we can spread the gospel if we're uncomfortable doing that. And that model is Costco. Yep, Costco. Now, most of us have been in Costco, I think, in our lifetimes. If not, we've all been in a Walmart store. And even locally up at Albertsons, we've been in that store. And there's a technique that these stores use, but Costco is the most aggressive, and they do the most about it. And that is, in addition to warehousing discounted goods for us to purchase to put in our basket, they also do a lot of selling in there. And if you go there on the weekend, for example, you'll find people in many of the aisles selling products. Most of it's food, but I've seen CDs, books, and phones done the same way. Now, what they have their product out there, they have their little kiosk, and what they're doing is they're offering their product as a free sample. They're not telling you, they're not asking you to buy it. They're putting the sample of the food in a little paper cup and handing it to you with a toothpick or a spoon or whatever, and that's yours free of charge, no strings attached. So guess what that does? We have a decision to make. We can test that, we can take a taste of that product. But the choice to do it is voluntary, it's ours. We're not having to respond for someone that's praising us. It's a voluntary act, free of charge. We may have heard about the product and never tried it. We may never have heard about the product, but we'll go try it because we've got nothing to lose, it's free. And every time we do that, every time they sell, now some of the people don't buy, but some do. Some do. Some don't buy right away, but they buy later on. And the point is this technique of giving free samples works, or they wouldn't continue to do it if it didn't work. And that's a pretty good guideline for us. If we go out into Boulder City and offer ourselves up as a free sample through acts of kindness, adding value into someone else's life, free of charge with no strings attached, little thing to take somebody to the store, that kind of thing, something changes. The person we add value to in their life changes. They're different after we've added value to them. But guess what? We're different again too. And that needle on that tank starts to continue to fill up. Now, salvation, again, requires two things. It requires a divine component and a human component, human effort. And we've caught the ball, so we're good to go there. But in our works, we can go forward and spread the gospel the way Christ asked us to do, simply by offering ourselves as free samples. Now, there's going to be a time when we realize that no matter how hard we try, we fail along the way. It is when we realize that and we capitulate and we go to God on bended knee and we say, Lord, I'm trying as hard as I can to get my tank full, but it just won't fill up. I can't get it past 3/4 of the tank. I need help. It is when we know that Christ will hear us and help us, grab us by the hand, and lead us through that transformation process. It is then we know that we will become beings that are able to cross that boundary between time and eternity successfully. We'll know that. We'll know our salvation is complete. It is then we also will know we're getting out of here alive. Amen.